sticking around to listen to me. I'm gonna open this up with the way I learned how to do it, and tell you that, hi everybody, my name's Greg, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Greg. Hi, Greg.
There you go. Yeah. I chose to do this. I've never done this before in front of anybody who wasn't seeking recovery from alcoholism. So this is a little different. But I also thought it'd be nice to share with some of you who don't know much about the program of Alcoholics Anonymous of how I found God. And it's kind of neat to be able to do this in a different way, because it's always been the same program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and now this is my church. So this is my family. It's a little tougher to do because you're not here for the same reason I am. But I really felt compelled to do this because I believe my family needs to know about me just like my AA family does. So I'd like to start off with letting you guys know that I basically learned how to read in Alcoholics Anonymous. I did not realize that my reading disabilities were, I could read words. I was great spelling and everything else, but I couldn't understand anything I read. And there's something we would do at the beginning of every meeting. Well, before I forget, I'd like you to join me in the Serenity Prayer, because that's another tradition, and it always takes the fear and anxiety away. Oh, look, she even got it up there. So if you join me. God, grant me serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. We open every meeting up with a preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other so that they may solve their common problem and to help others to recover from alcoholism. We have no dues or fees. We're self-supporting through our own contributions. We're not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. We don't engage in any controversy, neither endorse nor oppose any causes. The primary purpose is to stay sober and to help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Now, it's funny that I memorized that. I never tried to memorize that. I could never memorize more than a paragraph growing up. But today, it's funny how this works. When I started reading out loud to myself, everything started coming to me, because I'd have to say before I was in my mid-40s, I'd never even picked up and read a couple books out of the Bible, because every time I'd get about one page into it, I didn't know what the heck I was reading, so I always put it down. And it was just the same with any other book. I purposely did good in classes so I would be able to fail the book report at the end of the season, because I refused to read a book. But it's amazing. There's another part I'd like to read to you that we read at the beginning of every meeting, because it has so much meaning in it to me. In just two short pages, the meaning that comes out of that is pretty amazing, and it's how it works. It's how the program works. And it goes like this. Rarely have we seen a person fail as thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to the simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They're not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They're naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. And there are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. I used to raise my hand all the time because there was a couple other guys that would raise their hands. I thought, yeah, I think I'm crazy too, and I would start raising my hand. I actually stopped doing that because there are some people in the rooms who really do suffer some real emotional problems, and I thought, he's not raising his hand, so I put my hand back down. I'll get back to that. Grave emotional mental disorders. Many of them do recover if they have the capacity, to be honest, though. Our stories disclose in a general way what it used to be like, what happened, and what we're like now. And you've decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, and powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. And here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over the care of God as we understood him. And that's always underlined, as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. That's the hardest part right there. 5, admitted, now this is the hardest part. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we'd harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. And 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaimed, when in order, I can't go through with it. And so do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is, we're willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. There's description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if he were sought. And that's the end of that, how it works. And I never tried to memorize that. I was asked to read it over and over and over again. And there's so much in that 2 pages that I go back to. It's so amazing. And I found out that I could read. I found out I could start reading the Bible and it could come to me. It's kind of weird. I'd sit there and read aloud. You got to kind of be alone because it gets annoying when somebody else is in the room and you're reading to yourself out loud. But I get by. The way we tell our stories in 3 parts: what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And so I'd like to go maybe along the steps, to go through the steps. I'm not sure how I'm going to do this. If you notice, I don't have any notes. I've done this before. I don't think I used any notes the first time I did it. I just heard enough people do it that I thought, okay, just get up there and tell your story and start talking. So we usually start out on what it was like. I come from a family of 6, dysfunctional Brady Bunch, kind of like his, hers, and ours, and blue-collar family. My dad was a machinist. My mom worked in a bakery deli. She was in the grocery business for 35 years. Was then become a realtor for another 30 years. Close, 20, 25 years. But pretty big family. Still, I used to think we were, well, I always thought we were mid-level. We weren't spoiled kids, but we were a little better off than the poor kids, put it that way. Because we had our own pool in the backyard. But my parents, I didn't know this till I was older, but my parents put me through hockey, and I didn't realize that was a sport for wealthy kids, and we weren't a wealthy family. But so I realized that I was provided for really well. My parents really wanted to do the best they could. Now, I have to say, I really envied my parents. They were social people. They had lots of parties, lots of friends, people always stopping over for coffee. And I really envied them, but growing up wasn't so easy, and I never understood why. But there was this feeling of not fitting in quite a bit growing up. In the fourth step of taking this inventory, I had to go way back, sometimes even to ask somebody, what was life like for me as a baby or as an infant or as a toddler? Because I needed to find out, what happened or where things might have gone wrong. And I had even for my grade cards in school. I was going back through those, and I had comments from teachers like, Greg is very disruptive in class, and Greg won't leave other students alone, and Greg never turns in his homework, and there was just so many bad comments that I don't remember that I didn't know was a problem. But when I started investigating these old report cards, it was quite revealing and quite shocking that I was a kid who was starved for attention, or I'm not sure, but I was working with my sponsor, and he had shared with me that I had abandonment issues. And I thought, you're definitely nuts. So I was not abandoned, I was raised in a pretty good family. And he began to explain to me what he meant about that. And there was a drawback from my parents being very social people. It meant they weren't around a lot. There was parties, there was card club, there was JCs, there was bowling nights, there was golf nights. They were always on the go, and my sister spent a lot of time raising me. And my dad, before I was born, before he divorced, when he divorced, he was kicked out of the Catholic Church. And so, needless to say, in family growing up for me, there wasn't a whole lot of God talk, except, in slang, a lot of slang. My dad was a very boisterous, angry guy. I can't call him an alcoholic because when the doctor told him to quit, he quit. And I view an alcoholic as someone who wants to quit and can't, without help. So I never, once I got sober, I never called my dad an alcoholic. He was just a heavy drinker and a pretty angry guy. Because of those reasons of them not being around a lot, I know a lot of things that probably shouldn't have happened to a young kid happened to me. I discovered a lot of things. I became a nosy kid. I was alone a lot, so I tend to snoop through my dad's stuff, discovered a lot of things I shouldn't have discovered. I got into a lot of trouble because I wasn't told you shouldn't do that. I was very young. I took my first drink when I was 12. I was my first drunk, I'd say, when I was 12. I was probably earlier for my first drink, but my first drunk, I was 12 years old. And the things just started rolling after that. I experienced sex way too young of an age, and even before that, experienced pornography at way too young of an age. Never had those talks, the birds and the bees, the ones you fear. I can relate because I feared them too, and I realized that any talks that I had with my kids was too late also. But man, it sure would have been nice to have a little bit of warning on what I should and shouldn't be doing, because they became normal for me. Sex, drugs, rock and roll is what it was all about. And I'd say, let's move on. I get my driver's license. I'm a pretty full-time drinker. I got a job working in a bakery deli. Become a thief. I would steal from the cash register. I would steal from the beer cooler out back and load it out my back door at the bakery. Had lots of buddies because of that. lots of, goodies, deli subs, beer out the back. I mean, I was pretty cool. I had a car and a job and some free money. It was great being popular, I'd have to say. It was very early on, I learned about, well, I kind of lost my track there. Let's get back to that age, 16. Even 15 years old, I was driving my car without a license, under the influence, going 100 miles an hour down Westmore Drive, or whatever that road is, with the little hill on it. But, I was, right from the get-go, I was in trouble. Yet I never got in a whole lot of trouble. And I was really lucky. I didn't have any major accidents, lots of fender benders, and a DUI when I was 17 just for doing donuts on Main Street. At 1 o'clock in the morning, but I've certainly been blessed as far as staying out of trouble and no one getting hurt physically. But I knew I had a problem. I ended up getting into the weld shop, not because I wanted to be a welder, not because my dad was in the shop, but because these two guys were pretty cool, and they said that's where all the cool guys were. So I just went with it. I didn't know what I was doing. I just went with it. I was hanging out with two bad influences, two of the probably baddest influences I could find. It turns out the weld shop was the meanest, rowdiest group of guys you could ever hang with. They were definitely not like me. I was afraid of confrontation. I'd only been in one fight my whole life, and these guys were a whole bunch of fighters. They always wanted to fight and party. And it's funny, I realize that you try to keep your enemies as close as possible. And I realized a lot of my friends that I chose were people who I was afraid of. I wanted to be, close so they couldn't hurt me or intimidate me or what. There's a little bit of truth to that. I won't say that that's not what I wanted to be like too, but just looking back and seeing what I was like, it's very true. In high school, I fell in love with a girl at first sight, and because I wasn't told a whole lot of things, like, Greg, you shouldn't have sex, and if you do, you should use a condom. Wasn't told that either. So very early on, I decided I was going to join the Navy. I had a girlfriend. I was going to marry her, take her with me. I probably didn't have the guts to do that because we made a date, and I chickened out, and we didn't get married, and I went ahead and joined the Navy and left her behind. But 6 weeks into boot camp, I find out she's 8 weeks pregnant. And, of course, I joined with my best buddy system. He talked me into it, and we found out the news the same day that he's getting kicked out on a medical discharge, that I find out I'm having a baby. And my whole life, that's the first time I ever went to a church and prayed on my own, ever. And I just realized that I was hashing this out in my head last night, that as far as I know, God has answered every one of my prayers. It's just that I didn't know what the heck to pray for, because I remember asking God to make this all go away. And my first trip out to sea for 6 months, I get back and she don't want me anymore. She wants a divorce, and it all went away. And I had my career, and my 4-month-old son didn't even know who I was. I'd been out at sea for so long, or I take that back, 9-month-old son. And it was a struggle. As soon as I got out of the service, one of the reasons I joined the service was because I knew I had a problem. I was really focusing on my drug problem at that time, 18 years old, and I remember some friends with me in the car, and I turned left on a red light. And everybody freaked out, and I'm like, what? It didn't say no left turn on red. And that's when it hit me that I had a problem. And I just couldn't continue like this. I was going to end up Many of my friends were dealing drugs and ended up in jail, and I had to get away. It was a cure for me, join the military. I highly recommend it, especially for anyone who suffers in discipline. But it was just a geographical cure. I knew that they didn't allow it, and they did tests, so I thought I'll be safe. But the thing was, the Navy taught me to drink. They taught me to really drink. And, I was a pretty rough alcoholic after my wife left me. I had lots of time to have lots of fun. I lived daily in the pool hall and the strip joints, and it was like just the stories you would hear from a Navy guy, if he was not telling the truth. But it was the truth, and all we did every day after work, if we could get off the ship, was to go party. And I found friends to surround me with who could drink just like me, and I was quite the drinker. I remember when that bottle came out, they had the swirls in it, so the beer would come out faster. That came out after I quit drinking. I thought, oh, that would have been so great. You could put one down that much quicker. I had this thing, I could drink a beer in about 2 seconds and be ready for another one. My dad could drink a whole pitcher without setting it down, so it turns out I didn't fall far from the tree. I got to have a little bit of fun in the military. I was always sending my money home, so it wasn't the full bit. I have this problem. My biggest problem was also my biggest, my greatest asset, and that's my ego, my pride. I would never, if I'm not going to be the father of my kid, at least I'm not going to be a deadbeat dad. One of the greatest assets, or one of the greatest morals I ever learned, was to be a provider. I was taught well to always be a good provider, to be a hard worker. But that's about it. I mean, there's not much past that. So, my pride and ego was what kept me alive and what kept me fairly respectable. I don't want to be that guy. And so very quickly, I was back into another relationship as soon as I got out of the service. I still wasn't using that advice. Greg, you shouldn't have sex. Greg, you shouldn't not use a condom. Or what. And I ended up with another child on the way and ready to get married to a pregnant woman. And because I always thought I got to do the right thing. I didn't know what marriage really was. I had no understanding of God. There was no God in our upbringing. And just what you learn on TV and what you learn here and there and hearsay. And so I didn't have any understanding. I started to realize when I got sober that I never even really knew love, and never was able to give love. It was all ego. It was pride. I used to think I used to brag about my wife and kids. I talk them up so highly of the great athletes they were, and good students and hard workers, and my wife was this, and this, and this. And I thought that was showing my love. And it turns out I was bragging. Like, they're mine. Look what I got. And it had nothing to do with love. And that's about the extent of it. And that was a hard pill to swallow when I got sober. Because I didn't know God. I didn't know love. And I'd realized this spiritual program, all these principles that they were teaching me, every principle I had before that was just the opposite of that principle. And it was kind of, like I said, a tough pill to swallow. So this was a pretty good marriage, good upbringing. Maybe my kids still have some abandonment issues, even though they weren't abandoned. I was a soccer coach. I was a hockey coach. I was a Cub Scout leader. I even helped my wife coach, who was the good coach. She was a hockey coach, soccer coach. She was the athlete. That takes a lot of guts to be the assistant coach to your wife in a boys' sport. But yeah, I did it. I thought I was a pretty humble guy, good with kids, but I still drank like a fish. I still was selfish, self-centered. My whole life I struggled with, because I didn't know love, lust was love to me. And that's was always on my mind. That was what was most important for me. And I really hate to admit that, but it's the way most of us kind of live. And all these things my first wife, she left me because of my drinking. My second wife, she left me because of my drinking. I always had an excuse made, though. You know, my first wife cheated on me. That's why she left me. My second wife cheated on me. That's why she left me. I had an excuse, and I can reason these things out. And so it wasn't enough to make me quit. Another DUI on top of that. 2 DUIs, 2 lives lost. Best job I ever had, I lost working at Ball Metal for 12 years. Was fired because of my drinking. I took on a job of my own, being a handyman for 6 years, and did really well as a job. Did really terrible financially, though. My last wife, she left me, and then very soon after that, another DUI, and I was at rock bottom. She told me to leave, and I wouldn't leave. I said, "You leave. I'm not walking away from what I built, this empire, my house, this beautiful house on the south end of Hurd Avenue." And man, I just wished I would have left. It was such a struggle. She left and left me with everything, and it was the toughest thing I ever had to do. And soon after that, it was a DUI. I was out drowning my sorrows because I dropped the kids off at her house, and her guy opened the door and let them in. Murder, suicide went through my mind, and the best thing to do was to go get drunk, go get plowed. And I did, and ended up waking up. I fell asleep at the blinking red light at the Courier, waiting for it to turn green, I guess. 2 o'clock in the morning, and I just coasted on through, almost up onto the tracks, and that's where the cops pulled me out of my car like a rag doll. It wasn't a very exciting story to tell in AA, how'd you get here? You hear guys about, destroying cars and, police chases and everything else, and yeah, I fell asleep at a blinking red light waiting for it to turn green. That was my bottom. I still didn't quit drinking. I was not ready to quit. I think I went another 6 months before I had to go to court. And so all these things, all these signs that show that you got a problem, and I still didn't register that alcohol was my problem. And I showed up to my first meeting because they were going to, they say you won't have to go to jail if you go to 90 meetings in 90 days. And I thought, well, I better do that. And from the very first meeting, I heard people telling my same story. I'd go to a lead meeting like I'm doing right now. They call it a lead meeting, where somebody will get up and tell their story. And I would hear women tell my story. And I'm thinking, what's going on here? And I'd read the book, and I'd read the stories in the back of other people's stories. And there wasn't one story whose life I couldn't relate to. And so I knew I was an alcoholic. And, it was the first time I ever felt like I fit in. My whole life I always worried if I was going to fit in with the group. Like the tough guys. How am I going to get through this without having to be in a fight? And it's amazing I made it because I never did fight with these guys. But here I am. I'm finally accepted. I don't feel like I have to prove anything. I can be myself because they're just like me. And so this was my first introduction to God. I didn't even know AA was about finding God. I just knew Alcoholics Anonymous was for alcoholics. That was it. Never been to a meeting before in my life. And from that first meeting, I never took another drink. It's been over 8 years now, and I haven't had more than one time a bubble popped in front of my nose from a beer, and it was really awakening. That's about as much alcohol as I've had in the last 8 years. Not even a sip. And it's amazing. And I've, in the process, found God. And that first step, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. And that our lives become unmanageable. They didn't just tell you, admit you're an alcoholic. They'd share with us, does it feel like you're in a foxhole and you're all out of ammo and you're going to lose this war? Why not surrender? Wave that white flag. You want to just stand there and be killed? And just story after story after listening to people and then realizing, okay, I am powerless over this. I've never been able to control how much I'm going to drink once I take the first drink. And so that was an easy step to accept. All right, I'm powerless. I'm an alcoholic. But not only that, I'm powerless over a serenity prayer. Tells me that I'm powerless over everything except myself. People, places, and things. They told me to change people and places and things at first. And because I don't have any power over that. And if I put myself in the wrong places, I'm not going to be able to survive the situation. But yet, 4 months into my sobriety, I'm not really doing anything that good yet. We're working the steps, but I'm talking to somebody now. I'm sharing. And, of course, because I'm going to a meeting every day, I'm praying twice a day. We pray at the beginning and end of every meeting. Something I'd never done in my life. Things started to get better. Things started to get a lot better really quick. And I had a lot of problems. When I got in there, I realized that drinking was not my real problem. Lying was my real problem. That was number one. And it's like the drinking just went away. God just lifted it from me. And it says in the program that he will. And if you follow these steps, the second step became to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. I had to understand that I was insane and what the definition of insanity is, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And that was my motive. And I even continued that sober, like with relationships. I'd find a girl, really like her, and then make the same mistakes over and over again and wonder, what? I'm all better now. Why is it still going it this way? So I realized I can't get all better at once. But thank God he lifted the obsession to drink alcohol was, first and foremost. Then I could work on the other things because, man, was I a liar. You kind of got to lie when you want to live in sin. And it's funny to find it easier to lie than to tell the truth, even if the truth won't hurt you, because you get so used to doing it that it's just easier to lie. And then you got to keep other lies to keep that lie, and then you got to make sure you tell this person and that person so these people don't find out. And yeah, it's a big crazy mess, but it seemed normal in my life. And today, that's another thing. He's helped lift. Because I had a girlfriend ask me the other day, a couple years ago, actually. She said, Greg, you wouldn't lie to me, would you? And I was like, yeah, I probably would. And that was the most honest answer I could come up with at that moment. Yeah, I probably would lie to you. Because I know I'm not perfect. You were talking about trust. It's a lot easier for me to trust when I know you can't be trusted. When I could understand that you're just as fallible as I am, or maybe just as fallible as I am, that trust is a decision. It's not something that's automatic. It's just something you choose to do. It's not a requirement or anything. Like loaning money. I'm not going to loan money unless I know there's a good chance I'm not going to get it back, because I can't trust you, no matter who you are. I choose to trust. I don't say I trust, I choose to trust, because if you're anything like me, a human being, then there's a chance you might fail me. So it's a lot easier to trust knowing there could be repercussions. I'll move on to the third step. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. The second part, it's underlined, as we understood him. I didn't understand, and so many don't. And this is the part that takes me outside the meetings with the sponsor. This is where I needed to learn about God, because so far I didn't like to read, so there's no way I had a hard time reading their big book, let alone the Bible, the big book. And a guy just started talking to me every day after the meetings for hours, and just sharing about God, sharing why Jesus died on the cross. Yeah, I didn't even realize that I really didn't know. Even though I've heard it a million times, I didn't really know the story, that why he died on the cross. And I think I'm not the only one, too, because so many people are afraid because of what they've done, not knowing. My sponsor said that we are forgiven before we even do these things. And I thought, wow, that's quite a concept. This was all new to me. So I had to have a little bit of an understanding. Had to understand what was in the Bible, what the stories were, that it's not only history, but it's the future. It's our lives. And I didn't know any of that. I still pick up the book and read and think, why is this in here? Why am I reading it? I was reading today's reading. I don't know if you've done today's out of the Divine Mentor, but all this talk about building a temple and all these measurements and everything else. I'm like, why is this so important to me? But it's still what I have read and understand is amazing. More about what's been explained to me, the good stories, the ones that are get posted on TV and History Channel and the Old or the New Testament. But once I started to understand, I could make a decision to join this program, because that's basically what it's saying. I'm willing to work these steps. So the fourth step, the most impossible one for me, because reading is hard, but writing is even harder. And it says to make a list, a moral inventory of ourselves, of your whole life, looking back of what you've done wrong and who you've wronged and who you've hurt. And I could see it. I knew what my problems were, and I knew almost every situation, but I still didn't want to write them down, because that made it real. That validated it. And then I have to tell somebody, how about if I just skip writing it down? I'd rather just tell you. And that's actually kind of how I work the steps. I'm so afraid to write something down that I would just rather sit down and talk about it. And eventually I'm going to get it all out. Because the fifth step is admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. It's not talking about every single story, about every little bad thing you've done. It's the nature of those things, the 7 deadly sins. Just to see how selfish I am, and just to see how sin has become an obsession in my life. And it becomes easier to get better when you can see it. I didn't understand that my whole life was about sin, and I thought, wow, I got a lot to change here. This is really going to be tough. But I didn't become that way all in a couple years, so they reminded me that this is a lifetime program, and that, you may spend a long time on these steps, or a long time on that fourth and fifth step, if you don't have the capacity to be honest. And I understand that in that reading. Constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. I totally get it. It's like, how can you not be honest with yourself? How can you lie to yourself? I ask myself. You can't lie to yourself. You know when you're lying. But man, it's true. I can lie to myself and think I'm doing real good and be up here and share my story, but yet I'm still holding something back. Well, progress, not perfection, is what they tell us. And just getting up here and doing this, I should be happy with myself. But I'm going to sit down and think, oh man, why didn't you share more? But this is I guess once I started talking, when I stopped talking, that's all there's going to be. The sixth step, become ready. Entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. That happened to me about a year ago. Less than a year ago that I became entirely ready. I had a dream. I had a rapture dream. That's what it comes about. It was really scary because I was in a room full of dead relatives that were not dead. And the mode of transportation that I got there and everything else was really weird. But it was enough to wake me up because I'd realized in that dream I had my head cut off. Because I'd been reading Revelation. And I fell to my knees in my backyard thinking, God, I'm ready to have my head cut off for you. Whatever it takes. That I'm not going to deny you. And they become relevant and real. Like, wow, that dream was real. And that's what it could come to. And so that's when I became entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, we humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. It's like the same thing with 6. We're ready, now I need to ask him. And from that point on, things started really growing with me, and almost to a scary point. I'd start reading, and I'd start dreaming, and I'd start having visions, and I'd start reading a little more, and then I'd go this and that, here and there, and it was all about God. And it was a rude awakening because I started to believe that we are in end times and that I could, be there for that. But before it scared me, I remember early on in my sobriety when I started to have an understanding of God. The first time it ever occurred to me that I could have eternal life, I thought, wow, that's cool. And then, I'd sit and talk about with friends, not real strong Christians, but they still believe about, what it's going to be like. And we all agree it's going to be a hell of a show. And wouldn't it be great to be there? And I always thought I'd be totally afraid to have my life cut short. But, what a blessing to be there in the end. I don't know. It's the way I look at it today. Even though it is, the closer I get and the more time goes, the harder it becomes. Because I recently quit my job a few months ago. It's like, what am I going to do with my life? What am I doing right now? And I don't have a clue. It's like I kind of put my car in neutral and let God just push me around or something. I don't know. But I'll finish through the steps. The 8th step made a list of all persons we had harmed. I jumped into that right away. It doesn't matter what order you work them in, and they're spiritual principles. But I remember my first time I was totally honest was with my daughter. She was having problems with her mom. Her mom caught her sleeping with another kid. And she was really not very helpful with her. And she was really sad. And so I sat down and told her my story, the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Took about half an hour. All those things that I kept secret from her about myself, you wouldn't want to tell kids what dad's really like. Well, I told her what dad's really like and how Dad's relationships really were and how Dad handled those relationships. And it suddenly opened up a relationship with me and her that I'd never had. She suddenly trusted me and felt like she could tell me anything. So I thought, wow, that's very, very relieving. And I realized nobody's going to learn anything from your mistakes if you don't share your mistakes. And I thought, wow, what a concept. So I had to get right to my kid, my son, and share with him too. And it became a necessity to go find the people I'd hurt or harmed or stole from and go make amends. And the tough part is knowing you need to be ready to make full amends. And I still haven't found the guy who I stole from at the bakery. And I never stole again after that, as far as knowingly. But in my heart, I know I have to be ready to make full restitution. And I don't even know what that is. And hopefully he'll overlook it. But, you know, some amends are hard to make because I have to be ready to make full amends. And, wow, it's sometimes tough to do. But I am ready to make that amend. I'm ready to make any amend to anyone today. I wouldn't be standing here in front of you guys being able to do this if I wasn't ready to be totally honest about something. There's still something in my life that I probably couldn't share here with you guys today, but you know, that's okay. Maybe one day I will. We don't need to let all our secrets out. Just even though we are only as sick as our secrets, to get the point across is a good point. 10th step, continue to take personal inventory, and when we're wrong, promptly admitted it. That's pretty simple stuff. That's look at your day, repent where you've been wrong, and ask God to keep you sober another day. It's the only step we have to do every day. 11 steps, continue to take personal sought through prayer and meditation. Thanks, Levi. To improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and power to carry that out. That's, I guess, me going to church. I don't know, I've been coming here almost 4 years, and I probably don't miss 2, maybe 3 weeks a year. And for a guy who's only ever been to church once to pray in 40 years, that's quite a shock to me. And what am I doing? This is still all surreal to me that I come to church every Sunday, and that I volunteered to join a little huddle group, even though it was like, whoa, this isn't right. Me and 2 girls, what's going on here? This is just not appropriate. But I was out of my comfort zone, and I said, Greg, jump into your out of comfort zone, because that's what God wants you to do. Get out of your comfort zone. And so, even though this discipleship training and all these shapes and I really dug my feet in. I got 12 steps. I don't mess it up for me. I already know the 12 steps. But still, I wanted to continue because I felt God calling me to do this. The 12th step is, you Levi? Yeah. Thank you, Donna. I have to be in order or I won't get it. Having had a spiritual awakening, as a result of the steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. I was talking with Bill, and he asked me, why I don't sponsor many people. And the funny thing is, when I talk today in meetings, I sound a lot like my sponsor. And people make fun of my sponsor a lot. They ridicule him a lot because he's a very spiritual guy. And he's found Jesus, and he loves it. And he can't stop talking to people. He talks to people all day long, every day, and it's amazing the hours that he spent talking with me. And I sound like him when I talk sometimes. I'm thinking, wow, this is going to sound like Vince, but I better say it anyway because it needs to be said. And sometimes I feel like that's why I haven't been a big sponsor, because people are afraid of spiritual. I think they're afraid of Jesus. And the thing I love about the program is it lets people in softly. Some people are really mad at God. Some people really feel like they've been wronged. Why would God do this to me? And so we kind of ease them in. You don't have to talk about God if you don't want. Call your higher power. If you want to call that cup your higher power, if you want to call the room and all the people in it your higher power, whatever you want. But the funny thing is, the program is about finding God. But there's been so many people like my father who were pissed off at God. So, that's really, I think that's the part of the program that makes people look and think we're a cult or something, because we don't talk about Jesus. But it says in there, in the book, that you will start to see where people of religion were right. And in the 12th or 11th step, it talks about seeing your pastor, seeing someone to learn more about this higher power, continue to search. And it wasn't until I learned that I could read out loud and remember things finally that I started to find, more about God, and maybe what drew me to showing up to church every Sunday. I'll say it again, I didn't become an alcoholic overnight, so I knew I couldn't get better overnight. And I was asked what my journey is right now, and geez, I wish I knew what my journey was right now. But I don't have a clue. But I know I want it to continue with this family. The other thing I love about the program, Alcoholics Anonymous, is anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions. And it keeps a trust that we don't carry this outside the rooms. We don't gossip. We don't criticize. I could probably do this much easier in a big group. I've realized that this is harder to do in front of a smaller group because it's more personal. There's less people of you to look at, and it's like, oh God, looking at her again. Oh no, it's just you guys. I found it easier to do in a large group, except the harder part would be when it was over to hope that nobody, what they carry out of it, and it get criticized or to brag or anything to talk about. I'd rather anybody who would hear my story to find somebody else and share their story. Not, oh, you wouldn't believe the story I heard today, You wouldn't believe to hear Greg's story. I wouldn't want it like that. I'd rather hear somebody hear my story and then want to go tell somebody else their story. And I don't know. I'm starting to get to that end part where I haven't anything left to talk about. I got through the 12 steps. Anybody? I tell you what, we always finish with comments. So, today I'm here. I got a new roommate, Matthew, back there in the corner. He's a good kid, and we're supposed to help others. And right now, he's the only one I got around to help. But I guess I was going to say before I got up here, the toughest thing doing this was not standing up and doing it. The toughest thing was sending out invitations to my loved ones, knowing that there's probably a good chance that they didn't want to come. And
we're here for you, sir.
Yeah, thanks. That was the hardest part, knowing that all these people who probably could benefit from hearing my story because they've known me their whole lives, but yet never heard any story like this. I'd hope it would help, but, unless you got a problem and you want help, I guess you don't go finding help. So maybe they think that they have to have a problem to come listen to me. So I don't know. I guess it is what it is. I will open up for any questions or comments. That's it. Kathy. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, we do clap too. Yeah. Because that's hard to do. Kathy.
Well, I've known you since 2009, because we worked together, and I really, we've talked a lot, and I kind of knew parts of your story. I was kind of there to see some of the growth, but I still really wanted to be here because I thought, I don't know what you're going to say. I don't know the whole story. So, and also I wanted to hear it because I want to share mine, and I need to see how people share so that I can start to form my own story. So I thank you for having that courage and going before me as a model, an example, so that I can do the same thing.
Thanks, Kathy. Anybody else? All right. I hand it over to you, Bill.
The only thing
I got one from Bill.
As you're talking, I kept wrestling through the song we were singing. Your love never fails, it never gives up on me, or never runs out on me. And I have to be honest, there are times that song just drives me crazy. I'm like, why do we have to sing this phrase so many times? Like, we get it. Right? Because I don't know how many times you sing that phrase in the course of singing that song. I mean, it's loads of times.
15 times every time you sing.
Try keeping the volume up all the way through.
And I'm like, it gets a bit frustrating, but because it's not until the 13th or 14th time that it finally sinks in. This isn't for God's behalf, this is for mine. And it takes that many times sometimes for us to hear something before it finally sinks in that, oh, God doesn't need this reminder. I do. And even, as Greg shared his life, is we all have our own snafus and whatnot, as we all struggle with our own sins. There's nowhere that we can be that God can't and won't love us in. And so as we'll have the opportunity to share stories in life and whatnot, whether it be used to sharing up in the front or sharing with one another, there's nowhere we can be that God doesn't love us. And He's not going to give up. He is going to challenge us to grow, so get ready for that. It's been fun. I'm sure it's been a fun journey for you as well.
Well, I'd like you to take us out, Bill, because I
You don't want to pray?
Just to share
okay, go ahead.
that, I appreciate that you have shared your story with us, because I think that a lot of times we think that we forget that everybody has a story. There's a story behind everybody's past and everybody's history. And to be honest with having to drill down into your way back, to figure out what was going on, and then to be vulnerable enough to talk about making amends and what that looks like. I've had lots of people tell me, I have lots of friends that have been through the program that talk about giving their story, but I've never heard anybody do it. And so it was really touching to me to hear what God has done, the redeeming work that God has done, and that you were willing to share that story of redemption with us, and to have you as our family. We love you. We're glad that you felt comfortable enough to share.
Thanks. There's so much I missed too. Now you're mentioning, it's like, oh man, I didn't talk about that. Yeah, you've heard it all.
There'll be more dinner.
All right. Anybody else? The way we normally do this is the way we close it out in AA, is we all form a circle and we say the Lord's Prayer. So if you want to do it the way I'm used to doing it, let's all stand up and grab hands and
form some weird circle and say prayer. All right, everybody join me.